Hello and welcome to Woodlawn Anderson. This is the channel where we talk about economic, financial, and business things in simple terms. We're on the subject of gentrification. We're talking about the gentrification of the San Francisco area, but we're going to be talking about the history of the gentrification. In other words, how did San Francisco get to be the most gentrified place in the United States? Let's start with what the word gentrification, where it's derived from. The word gentrification was coined by a lady named Ruth Glass in London in 1964 when she was asked to do a survey on a certain location, a certain cohort in London. She came up with the term. Gentrification is really gentry, and gentry implies that in France there was a middle class, the artisans, the ones that fit below the aristocracy, but they were not the poverty people. These are the gentry type people. Let's talk about some of the tools that is used for gentrification. One is redlining. This goes back many years back to the Franklin Delano Roosevelt administration, which we're going to talk briefly about. Zoning and tax credits for developers are used. There's a lot, white flight naturally occurs. There's something called restrictive covenants, where in your lease or in your title it tells you who you can and cannot sell this property to. Another tool is slum clearance. And let's jump into really San Francisco history. Let's start with the gold rush, 1848. In Massachusetts, Frederick Douglass put in the North Star publication informing people that there was gold in California. So that was a motivation, at least for some of the free blacks, to head there. The same information came out in Europe. It was along with the immigration from Western Europe coming to California to get their piece of the gold. A lot of the black workers, although they were miners, a lot of them had jobs like secondary jobs like cooks and cleaning and labor. The Mexican migration became, the Mexicans came up to try to get their piece of the rock, as you would say. A lot of blacks came over trying to avoid the fugitive slave laws. Let's talk about the railroads. That played a major impact. The Transcontinental Railroad was starting to be constructed, and they needed a labor force. So the labor force that was most easily available was from China. So they brought a lot of Chinese workers over to work to build the railroad at rates of 30 to 50% less than they would pay their white employees. At one point, San Francisco was had the largest Chinese population outside of China. Then, around that time, San Francisco was a melting pot. You had all kinds of people there. Even in 1895, the Japanese immigration started to happen. The amazing thing about the Japanese, when they came over, they removed their traditional garments and automatically accepted the American way. They opened farms, they opened businesses, and Japtown was born. There's a little Italy. A lot of Italians came over to work in the mines. Around, I'd say, the turn of the 20th century, the first Great Migration became normal as blacks started to move to the South to get an opportunity in California. One thing that did happen in the South is a lot of the whites down there, because the black labor was so cheap and they were losing the black labor to go on their own, they had something called down on the farm laws, where they would try to just, I don't know if it's a law, but it was some type of device used to keep black people from leaving the South. We're going to jump ahead to the Japanese internment camps during World War II, where the Japanese throughout the West Coast, including San Francisco, were moved inland. They lost their businesses. They were sold for pennies on the dollar. They lost their land, their houses. But by 1988, they had made an agreement with President Reagan where he gave them $20,000 per family, per person, but you had to be alive. And you had to state that you would bring no further claims against the United States. To me, I thought the Japanese accepted this because they wanted to codify their Americanship. It wasn't that much for the money. And they wanted an apology for what was going on. Later on, the second Great Migration began, where blacks came from the South for jobs in California and San Francisco. And then going back a little bit, the Polish had come over, the Mexicans, I said, in the 1920s. Other Latino groups started to come over in the 60s. And the 70s, it was a lot of LGBTQ became prevalent in California, in San Francisco. There was an ELLIS Act which allowed landlords to remove tenants if you sold your building. Now, also in 1960, there was an area in San Francisco called Manila Town, which was totally, it's a whole separate story how they were treated in Manila Town, the Philippines. It was mainly men. They didn't allow women to come over. It's a horror story which I'm going to give in another essay. San Francisco is also known for single room occupancies, and they've eliminated a lot of those. There were families that used single room occupancies, in which, in other words, you might have a family member, husband and wife, living in one room, and on another floor you might have a daughter and son. That's how hard it was to get housing in San Francisco. Airbnb is huge now in San Francisco. Rent control, there is rent control in San Francisco, but that's even under attack. Basically, the Fillmore District, the Mission District, and other districts in San Francisco have become gentrified. Let me suggest to you that if you want to see a good movie on what's happening in San Francisco related to gentrification, you should see The Last Black Man in San Francisco. It's a 2019 movie, and they give you a good perspective of what's going on in gentrification in San Francisco. I'd like to thank you for your time. Please hit the subscribe button. Please hit the like button, and have a good day. Bye.